But there's a story regarding Ukraine. Something doesn't add up, but you're getting to the bottom of it.
Well, it's so interesting to me what's going on in Ukraine, and it's hard to figure out. I'll tell you that much. And the information, when we got the most trusted name in news is CNN, let's face it, you cannot trust the information that you receive through the news stream here in this country. That in and of itself is its own story. We talk about that all the time, and it's pretty sad. But you remember this incident that happened, and we covered it here on the show. And it was an incident that happened where Biden went over to the Ukraine. He had $1 billion loan guarantee to give them in the Ukraine, and he basically threatened the president of the Ukraine and said, if you don't fire this special prosecutor, who just happened to be looking into the company that his son worked for, a company called Burisma, the Ukrainian gas company that his son, with absolutely no experience in the energy or gas world, was put on the board at a pretty hefty sum of $83,000 a month. Okay, that company was being investigated by this prosecutor. The guy's name was Victor Shokin, and Biden said, if you don't fire that guy, you're not getting the $1 billion. I mean, I think we all can remember that incident that happened, and some new information has come out. But just in case you can't remember it, let's play the clip again. And this is Biden at the Council on Foreign Relations event where he's bragging about holding this over the head of Ukrainian President Viktor Poroshenko.
I went over for, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
Solid. I wonder what he means by solid. Probably willing to work with Hunter. Somebody who is willing to work with Hunter is somebody solid, somebody we could count on. Anyway, he got this Ukrainian prosecutor fired. Now, that meeting that he was describing where he was over in Ukraine, that either occurred when he was speaking to the Ukrainian parliament in December of 2015, or it occurred when he had a meeting with Poroshenko that had a very light readout on the embassy wire as to what actually occurred there in late January of 2016. So sometime at the end of 2015 or beginning of 2016. By the way, Hunter started working at Burisma April of 2014, so he was there for a number of years before this occurred. Now, what's come out now is that, and of course, by the way, I want to say Victor Shokin signed all kinds of affidavits, and you remember we told you about that, saying that he was trying to investigate Burisma. He was told to stand down because of Hunter Biden's involvement, and they didn't want to irritate the Americans. He refused to stand down, and then he was fired by the president. That's what he said happened. Well, now it's come out, and this is what's so interesting, that just in the summer of 2015, U.S. State Department officials, including Victoria Nuland on behalf of John Kerry, the then Secretary of State, were just falling all over themselves with praise for Victor Shokin. Nuland wrote a special letter. And at that time, she was Undersecretary of State. And remember, she's the one that basically said, F the EU, if you remember that whole incident. Victoria Nuland, not the world's nicest diplomat. Anyway, she wrote this glowing letter to Victor Shokin saying that Secretary Kerry asked her to write it on his behalf to let Shokin know he enjoyed the full support of the United States as he set out to fight endemic corruption in the former Soviet Republic. And she said, quote, the ongoing reform of your office, law enforcement, and the judiciary will enable you to investigate and prosecute corruption and other crimes in an effective, fair, and transparent manner. The United States fully supports your government's efforts to fight corruption and other crimes in an effective, fair, and transparent manner. Now, this letter was sent to him just about 6 months before Biden made the decision that Shokin had to go because he was getting a little too close. Now, Biden would never say this, of course. He wasn't fighting corruption hard enough. But let's just use our common sense, folks. Let's just use our common sense. He was investigating the company that Biden's son worked for and getting a payday of $83,000 a month. By the way, some percentage of that, remember, has to go up to the big guy. And you know who the big guy is. That's your president now. the big guy as the memos. Again, if you piece all this stuff together, you see the real truth of what's going on. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's the problem, right? You can't go back to sleep once you've woken up and you can see the real corruption that's going on in our world. Interestingly enough, that particular memo from Victoria Nuland to Victor Shokin was apparently never produced to President Trump's impeachment defense team, and it was never turned over to the Senate investigation into Biden's illegal corruption in Ukraine via this Burisma board seat that his son got. Senator Ron Johnson has been howling about that, of course, like all congressmen. They howl a lot, and then nothing ever happens. We've been watching that for years now, the howling, and nothing ever happens. But at least somebody's out there telling the truth so that you can go out there and confirm what we're telling you is, in fact, the truth.
It's when you hear all this and when you lay it out like this, Morgan, it makes me feel like everybody should see what's happening, but this information isn't disseminated the way that you just did it.
No, they won't tell it to you, and if they do, it'll be obscured, and I think this has been fact-checked and declared to be false. Again, these are all legitimate source documents from the State Department itself, from other sources when we get into some of the emails off the Hunter Biden laptop, which has never been disavowed. Again, you pull all of these things together in one place, and the picture it paints is of staggering corruption in our own government. And with the guy sitting right at the top right now, your president, Joe Biden, a staggering amount of corruption. And you wonder where all this money... Joe Biden, if you look at his financial history throughout almost his entire life in politics, he never had 2 pennies to rub together. He never had anything in savings. He never made much money. He never had a lot of assets. Now, all of a sudden, he's got several houses. He's got tens of millions of dollars. He's got all this money. Where does all this come from? Well, it comes from the cuts that he's getting from the work that Hunter is doing, running around being his bag man, picking up the bribes from the communist Chinese, picking up the bribes from the Ukrainian oligarchs who want to continue with their corruption in country. What do you think that $1 billion loan guarantee means? Oh, we'll back that up. Hey, you lose a few $100 million here and there, don't worry about it. We got you guaranteed on that. Just keep spending the money, keep giving it away to your friends and the other cronies in the corrupt government. So that's what's going on. And you can see it just plain as day. But again, like you said, Roxanne, nobody in the media is going to lay that out for you. That's just going to be ignored. You're not going to hear that on the most trusted name in news. You're not even going to hear that on Fox News, probably. You're not going to hear that anywhere and through any of the mainstream channels. Maybe you'll hear it from a guy like a Joe Rogan or something like that if he dives into the details one of these days or has the right guest on. But, isn't it crazy that that's where we have to get our truth now, is from a guy who's a comedian, basically. Joe Rogan's basically a comedian, and a commentator for, MMA fights. And no disrespect to him. I think he's actually a very bright guy, and I like his perspective, and I really like the conversations that he has.
You like to see fearless conversations in today's day and age.
Yeah.
And not politically correct necessarily. But with Joe Rogan, not only would he have that conversation, but then other media sources would tell us that was not true.
Right.
Or they would try to take it off Spotify.
Well, and they'd have to remove another 125 of Joe Rogan's past episodes, for various things that they say he's done. Anyway, it's just silencing conversation, silencing the free exchange of ideas. And, when you see people doing that, just like they're doing in Canada right now with these truckers, when you see them trying to silence other people's ability to freely exchange ideas and information, that's a good hint to you that the people that are doing the silencing are on the wrong side of the argument. Because if they were on the right side of the argument, if they had the better information, you wouldn't need to silence your critics. You could just out-argue them. You could just disprove their position. Instead, they want to silence them. When you see that going on, it ought to make you stop and think, wow, maybe the people that they're wanting to silence are actually right about this, what they're saying. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.